Ben's silence was our deepest pain in Austin. At 6 years old, my son lived isolated in his own world, without words to share his fears or joys. The pressure we felt was huge. It was the weight of a severe diagnosis, pitying looks, and the constant search for any therapy, any miracle that could connect us to him. It was during this difficult time that we found Brutus, a giant, muscular pit bull rejected for his past and stigmatized at the local shelter. Everyone, from friends to specialists, advised us not to take him. But Brutus, the monster nobody wanted, did the unexpected, the impossible. He became the silent voice and eventually our family's golden protector. He proved in our Westlake home that true love has no breed and that salvation can come on 4 paws from the most unexpected places. Our home in Westlake, Austin, Texas, showed a perfect calm from the outside. The green yard and the welcoming shade from the oak trees created a perfect appearance. But inside, the house was a place of deafening silence. David and I, loving but exhausted parents, moved carefully, afraid to disturb Ben's fragile world. My son lived in a strict, repetitive routine. The same blue shirt, the same toys organized in unchangeable lines. Every moment was an effort to keep him stable, an effort that consumed all our family's energy and was made worse by the community's silent judgment. I felt the neighbors' stares and the pitying words from other parents. Our big hope, the chance for Ben to connect to the outside world, was the last hope we had left. The pediatrician's suggestion about a support animal was a lifeline. My plan, careful and cautious, was to go to the Austin Municipal Kennel, Texas, and find a predictable dog breed, a golden retriever or a Labrador, that wouldn't cause controversy. But when we arrived, the environment was a sensory shock. The sound of frantic barking and the intense anxiety of the place overwhelmed Ben. He started getting upset, shaking his head and squeezing my hands. Desperate to calm him down, I took him to the last row of kennels, the most isolated and quiet. There, Ben stopped. What caught his attention was Brutus, a huge, muscular pit bull, curled up in a corner, ignored by everyone. His quietness in the middle of all that chaos was unusual. The shelter worker didn't hesitate to emphasize Brutus's dark past, rescued from a situation of neglect and fighting. The story reinforced my rational fear. But it was Ben who acted first. He pulled away from me, determined, and slowly moved toward Brutus's cage. Panic hit me, and the worker tried to stop him, but Ben ignored her. I watched the scene in silence. At that moment, I saw in Brutus's eyes the same resignation that seemed to be in Ben's eyes. 2 souls judged by labels, trapped by prejudices. I knew it wasn't my impulsive choice. It was my son's undeniable and immediate connection, a call I couldn't ignore. My fear gave way to a stubborn and protective determination. I knelt in front of the cage, taking a deep breath and challenging the expectation that the dog would be aggressive. Brutus, instead of barking or growling, tilted his head and gently sniffed Ben's outstretched hand, releasing only a soft whimper. The scene broke the fighting dog stereotype that the media painted. My action was impulsive. I rushed to fill out the paperwork, feeling a feverish urgency to complete the adoption before the voice of reason and David made me turn back. Brutus, now ours, quietly occupied the back seat of my SUV on the way back to Westlake. Arriving home was a bomb. The neighbors looked with silent disapproval. David turned pale with shock and fury, demanding to know how I could put our son at risk with a dog of that breed. However, in the middle of the argument, Ben broke his routine. He approached the imposing pit bull and touched his snout. Brutus, the feared dog, stayed still, receiving the touch with remarkable quietness. David, recovering his composure, but with a cold and challenging tone, declared, "You have 1 week to prove that this dog isn't dangerous, or he goes back to the shelter. 1 week to prove that your intuition destroyed our family." If you have a pet, leave in the comments their name and how they came into your life and like the video. It helps us a lot. You won't believe what this beast did. Just watch. The morning at the Thompson residence in Westlake, Austin, Texas, was unbearably tense. David had imposed an ultimatum, and every hour was a weight on my chest. I watched every movement of Brutus from afar, feeling the pressure of failure. David, with the coldness of a software engineer, left for work, making the final deadline very clear. Ben was in the living room, and although he didn't show emotion, his furtive glances toward Brutus, confined in a large travel crate, indicated a subtle break in his ritualistic world. The moment of crisis happened near lunchtime. The change in routine and the anxiety hanging in the air triggered Ben. He started shaking his head more intensely and then let out a scream of sensory overload that seemed to tear through the silence. The boy crawled quickly, seeking refuge under the heavy mahogany table in the kitchen. I knew that any attempt to pull him out by force would only make things worse, but the fear that the pit bull would react to this noise and agitation paralyzed me. I was trapped between my son's safety and Brutus's fate. I prepared myself for the agonizing routine of trying to calm Ben down, but I was interrupted by a different sound. Brutus, who was quiet in his crate, let out a deep grumble. Low, but without aggression. Ben's response was immediate. He stopped struggling and came out from under the table. Fascination replaced panic on his face, and he crawled directly to the travel crate. I froze, expecting the worst. Ben reached the travel crate and, with difficulty, managed to pull the door, freeing Brutus. The pit bull came out calmly. Instead of going to the boy, Brutus walked to the center of the rug and lay down on his back, a canine submission gesture. This action, completely illogical for what was expected of a fighting dog, transformed terror into curiosity. Brutus was there, performing a calming ritual of vulnerability. Brutus's submission gesture reached Ben in a way that human voice couldn't. The boy remained seated, mesmerized by the warmth. Brutus then lifted his head and gently licked Ben's hand. The crisis stopped completely. Tears of relief ran down my face. I had the proof. I ran to get my phone and record the moment. The footage of that silent bond would be the only thing capable of saving Brutus. The only question now was, how would David react to this total break from his worldview? Night had arrived. The air in the house was thick, anticipating David's return. The scene in the living room was of unprecedented but fragile peace. Brutus was in his crate, and Ben was sleeping deeply, his head resting on the pit bull's lap. I held my phone, tense, where the video played on loop. The living room had become the stage for a decisive confrontation. David entered through the garage door, his face showing an exhausted and irritated software engineer. He went straight to the kitchen, ignoring the living room and the dog, a tactic to impose his will. He was determined to return the animal, considering him a threat. The core of the disagreement wasn't just the pit bull, but the crack of trust that my impulsive attitude had created in our marriage. David started the conversation directly and coldly. "Time's up, Sarah. The pit bull goes back tomorrow morning. We're not risking Ben's safety for an impulsive act of yours." Instead of arguing, I chose not to fight with words. My desperation transformed into a determined quietness. I simply extended my phone. David, caught by surprise by my lack of verbal resistance, hesitated for a moment, took the device, and watched the recording. David watched the video in absolute silence. The dim lights of the room reflected the disbelief on his face. He saw the aggressive dog release a soft rumble, Ben's break from routine when opening the crate, Brutus's act of lying on his back, and the final scene of Ben nestling against the pit bull. David's logical conviction, based on prejudices, was shaken. He returned the phone, but his silence wasn't surrender, but rather a deep and cold confusion. The wall he had built against Brutus had cracked, but hadn't collapsed yet. David looked at his son, who slept peacefully next to the dog. That state of quietness was the verdict. Without looking at me, he whispered, "He can stay. But the responsibility is totally yours, Sarah. Any slip." The permission was a relief, but came with the weight of constant surveillance. I knew the challenge now was bigger. It was no longer convincing David, but convincing the world, starting with the imminent knock on the skeptical neighbor's door. The sun rose in Austin, Texas, bringing with it a new and strange normalcy. Brutus was officially in the house, but David's presence was marked by tense vigilance. The pit bull followed Ben like a silent shadow. The external threat materialized with a knock on the door. It was Hank, the neighbor, known for his rigidity and for expressing his contempt for pit bulls. Hank, a big and imposing man, didn't waste time. "Sarah, I know you adopted a pit bull. It's dangerous, and we live in a neighborhood with children. You have to get rid of him." The problem was the personified social pressure and the risk that Hank would mobilize the Westlake Neighborhood Council to force Brutus's removal. My response was exhaustion transformed into cold anger. I knew that logic wouldn't work with Hank. He was trapped in his prejudice. I refused to argue and instead opened the door so Hank could see the living room. His expectation of finding an aggressive dog and a chaotic environment was subverted. He stopped at the threshold, open-mouthed. In the middle of the room, Ben was in a phase of intense agitation, banging his head in protest. Brutus was nearby. The moment Ben started screaming, the pit bull did his routine. He gently placed his head on Ben's thigh and started licking his arm calmly. The scene spoke louder than any argument. The muscular dog, the intense focus on calming the child, and the way Ben stopped his head-banging movement. Hank, the skeptical neighbor, remained still for a long minute. His harsh expression gave way to confusion, and then to resignation. He saw the bond, the anomaly of that pit bull's behavior. I've never seen anything like this," he murmured, his voice hoarse. Without another word, he turned and left. Brutus was safe from external threats, and David came down the stairs with a softer expression. The result was the dog's total acceptance. If you believe in the unexpected power of unconditional love, leave your like now. Comment on the greatest miracle you've ever seen happen with an animal. If this journey is moving you, subscribe. 4 years passed at the Thompson house in Westlake, Texas. Family life flourished in Brutus's presence. The pit bull, now graying and slower, but with the same deep calm, was the silent center of the house. Then had developed a unique form of communication with the dog's help. David had completely abandoned his skepticism. Life was peaceful, but the shadow of Brutus's rapid aging hung over us. Brutus's health started declining rapidly. The pit bull, who was already at an advanced age when adopted, began having difficulty climbing the stairs. The problem was the inevitability of loss, and the fear was that Brutus's absence would make him regress to his initial isolation. The pain wasn't just for the dog, but for anticipating my son's grief. We acted with love and dignity. We adapted the house, and the vet confirmed kidney failure. David's and my response was silent pain, but we decided to give Brutus his happiest last days. The unexpected, however, was Ben. He didn't seem confused or sad, but rather more affectionate, laying his head on Brutus's chest and massaging the dog's back, as if he understood the urgency of time. The decision for euthanasia, made together with the vet, was the final act of love. Brutus's final moment would be at home, under the big oak tree in the yard. David and I were beside the dog, crying openly. Ben was there, quiet. Brutus, with the last thread of strength, lifted his head. He licked Ben's hand for the last time, a final gesture of unconditional love. Brutus passed away peacefully. The sadness was real, but Brutus's miracle hadn't disappeared. The next day, Ben went to the area where Brutus's travel crate used to be. He sat alone, and instead of going into crisis, he grabbed his communication board and pointed to the symbols. Dog. Good. Love. The rejected pit bull left a legacy of communication and unconditional love in our house. Silence returned to our house in Austin, but it wasn't the oppressive silence from before. Now it was a silence filled with memory, gratitude, and Ben's newly discovered voice. David and I had been transformed. Brutus was the catalyst that forced David to confront his prejudice against the breed, and me to trust my deepest intuition about my son. He taught us that truth isn't in statistics, but in connection. He was the silent translator who brought Ben out of his world of rigid routines. His life, though short with the family, was proof that salvation can come from where you least expect it, often on four paws. We were no longer the exhausted parents from before. We were the guardians of a story, that of a dog who taught us the language of unconditional love, a lesson more valuable than any therapy. Brutus left, but the love he taught remained, shown in every new symbol that Ben points to and in every peaceful day that our family now enjoys in our Westlake, Texas home. Our rejected pit bull became our silent protector, giving us the voice we needed to live.